Chapter 1. The First Shot. The lights of Chesterfield shone dimly under the relentless rain that night. Jack Sullivan, a private detective with more scars than happy memories, was sunk in his office, surrounded by the smoke of his cigarette and the suffocating silence that filled the air. The bourbon bottle beside him was halfway empty, enough to numb the pain of the cases that never got solved. Then the phone rang, a shrill sound that cut through the night like a blade. Jack answered with a grunt, his voice hoarse from tobacco and drink. On the other end of the line, a shaky, panic-filled voice. It was Officer Matthews from the local precinct. "Sullivan, we need you at the docks. They've found a body." "It's Marcus Thorne," said Matthews, with a tone that mixed urgency and despair. Marcus Thorne, a name carrying the weight of Chesterfield's underworld, a successful businessman to some, a crime lord to others. Jack knew that Thorne's death wouldn't be a simple murder case. There was something deeper, darker, hidden in the shadows of that city. Arriving at the crime scene, the cold rain whipped Jack's face, but he barely noticed. His eyes, accustomed to the darkness, scanned every detail. Marcus Thorne's body lay sprawled on the dirty alley floor, blood mixing with rainwater, forming small red pools. Around him, a few police officers did their best to preserve the scene, but Jack knew the real work was just beginning. Jack knelt beside the body, observing carefully. Thorne's right hand still held a gun, but there were no signs he had fired it. Something was wrong. Very wrong. "Looks like suicide, but something doesn't add up," Jack muttered to himself. A movement caught his attention. A young policeman, clearly nervous, approached. "Mr. Sullivan, we found this in Mr. Thorne's pocket," said the policeman, handing him an envelope. Jack opened the envelope carefully. Inside, there was a handwritten letter, apparently a confession. Thorne admitted to being involved in criminal activities but denied making mortal enemies. The letter ended with an enigmatic phrase, "The truth lies in the shadows." Jack's mind started working at full speed. Marcus Thorne was a man with many secrets, and each secret was a potential clue. He knew he needed to start digging into Thorne's past to find the truth. Back in his car, Jack took out his notebook and made a few notes. He needed to speak with Claire Thorne, the widow. Claire was known for her beauty and coldness, a woman many said was the real force behind Marcus' empire. If anyone could shed light on Thorne's secrets, it was Claire. On the way to the Thorne mansion, Jack's mind was a whirlwind. He thought of the years he spent in the shadows of the city, the lies he uncovered, the mysteries he solved. This case, however, felt different. Something about it seemed more personal, more dangerous. Upon arriving at the imposing mansion, Jack was greeted by a butler who led him to the living room. Claire Thorne was sitting in a velvet armchair, holding a wine glass as if it were a shield. Her eyes, a cold blue, analyzed Jack with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. "Mrs. Thorne, I'm sorry for your loss," Jack began, trying to gauge the situation. "Detective Sullivan, we don't need your condolences. We need answers," replied Claire, her voice firm and controlled. Jack nodded. He knew he was dealing with a woman of iron. He sat in front of her and went straight to the point. "Marcus was involved in many things. I received a letter found with him. It mentions secrets and shadows. What do you know about this?" Claire hesitated for a moment, her gaze wavering. Finally, she sighed. "Marcus had many enemies, Detective. He was always surrounded by betrayal and distrust. In recent days, he was especially nervous. He mentioned a meeting with Victor Delgado, an old associate. Something went wrong. I know that." Jack noted the name. Victor Delgado was an unknown name in the city, a gangster with a past as dark as the night. He needed to speak with Delgado, but first, there were more questions to ask. "Claire, Do you believe Marcus was afraid of something specific? Someone in particular? Jack pressed, trying to extract more information. Claire looked at him, and for a moment the cold mask she wore seemed to crack. She slowly shook her head. Marcus never fully trusted anyone, Detective. Not even me. But if there was something that terrified him, it was the past, the things he did, the people he betrayed. He always said the past would one day exact its price. Jack stood up, thanking her for the information. He knew this was just the beginning. Marcus Thorne's past was buried deep in Chesterfield, and to find out who really pulled the trigger, he would have to unearth every secret, every betrayal. The city never sleeps, and the shadows always have stories to tell. Jack Sullivan was ready to hear them all. As he left the mansion, the rain continued to fall, as if the sky were weeping for the lost soul of Marcus Thorne. Jack knew the investigation would take him to dangerous places, but he was used to walking the thin line between light and darkness. And this time, he was determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Chapter 2. The Last Meeting. The next morning dawned with a gray sky, reflecting Chesterfield's somber mood. Jack Sullivan was in his office, reviewing the notes from the previous day. His conversation with Claire Thorne had left him with more questions than answers. There was something in the way she spoke about Marcus and Delgado that suggested hidden layers of secrets. He needed to dig deeper. Jack's first stop was the Blue Moon, a seedy bar known for its dubious patrons and the secrets whispered between cheap drinks and cigarette smoke. It was the kind of place where Marcus and his associates used to conduct their dirty business. Jack entered the bar, feeling the gaze of the patrons settle on him like hawks on prey. Behind the counter, wiping glasses with a grimy rag, was Lou, the bartender who knew more than he let on. Lou was a burly man with a graying beard and shrewd eyes that seemed to see beyond appearances. Jack Sullivan. "It's been a while," Lou said, not looking up from the glass. "Lou, I need information about Marcus Thorne and Victor Delgado. What do you know about their last meeting?" Jack got straight to the point. Lou paused for a moment, as if considering the request. Finally, he gave a heavy sigh. "Marcus and Delgado met here about a week ago. They seemed tense. It's not uncommon to see guys like them here, but something was different that night. Marcus was nervous. Delgado was furious. They were talking about a debt, and there was a third man with them. Someone I didn't recognize." Jack mentally noted every detail. A third man. This changed the game. Who was this person, and what was his role in the story? "Who is this third man, Lou? Did you hear any names?" Jack pressed, knowing Lou had a habit of eavesdropping on conversations. "I didn't catch a name, but he seemed important. Important enough for Marcus and Delgado to care about what he had to say," Lou replied, his eyes fixed on the glass he was obsessively cleaning. Jack knew he needed more than that. He left a few bills on the counter, thanking Lou before heading out. The next step was finding Victor Delgado. But Delgado wasn't an easy man to find, especially when he didn't want to be found. Jack made a few calls and, through his contacts, discovered that Delgado was hiding out in one of his usual haunts, a jazz club on the darker side of town known as the Velvet Room. The club's facade was discreet, but behind the red velvet curtains the place pulsed with an almost palpable energy. Entering the club, Jack was immediately enveloped by the soft music and the charged atmosphere. He spotted Delgado at a table in the back, surrounded by a few henchmen. Delgado was a middle-aged man with slicked-back black hair and a calculating gaze. Seeing Jack approach, he raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Jack Sullivan." "To what do I owe the pleasure?" Delgado said, his voice tinged with a slight Spanish accent. "We need to talk, Delgado." "About Marcus Thorne," Jack replied, without preamble. Delgado motioned for his men to step away and indicated a chair for Jack to sit. The tension between the two was palpable. "Marcus had a debt with me, a big one. He didn't pay, and now he's dead. Simple as that, Delgado said, lighting a cigar. Nothing is simple when it comes to Marcus Thorne. Who was the third man at your meeting? Jack insisted, carefully observing Delgado's reaction. For a moment, a shadow crossed Delgado's face, something Jack recognized as fear or perhaps distrust. I don't know his name. A new man in town. I've heard he has connections in high places. I don't involve myself in matters that don't concern me. Sullivan, Delgado responded, blowing out a cloud of smoke. Jack knew he was being led only so far, and then shut out. Delgado had more information, but wasn't willing to share it. Not without a good reason. Jack thanked him and left the club, his mind swirling with the new pieces of the puzzle. Back at his office, Jack reviewed everything he knew. Marcus Thorne was at a dangerous crossroads, involved with powerful and dangerous people. The third man was the key to uncovering the truth. But to find this man, Jack needed to follow the only concrete lead he had: Marcus' relationship with Claire and the secrets she might still be hiding. As night fell over Chesterfield, Jack felt he was only beginning to scratch the surface of something much bigger. And in the shadows of the city, he knew the truth was waiting to be discovered. Chapter 3. Clues in the Underworld night in Chesterfield was a stage of shadows and neon lights, reflected in the puddles of the dirty streets. Jack Sullivan knew that to find answers, he needed to dive even deeper into the city's underworld. The clues led him to places where the law was just a meaningless word, and danger was always lurking. Jack drove to one of the most run-down neighborhoods in the city, a maze of dark alleys and abandoned buildings. His first stop was the Red Lantern, a bar known to be a meeting point for criminals of all kinds. It was the kind of place where, if you knew how to ask the right questions and pay the proper price, you could discover anything. Upon entering the Red Lantern, Jack was immediately enveloped by the strong smell of alcohol and the muffled sound of low-toned conversations. The bar was dimly lit, with the only light coming from an old jukebox in the corner, playing a sad jazz tune. Jack headed to the counter where Jimmy the Rat, an informant who owed Jack favors, was standing. Jimmy was a small, nervous man, with eyes that always seemed to be in motion, as if constantly looking for an escape route. Seeing Jack approach, he tried to appear nonchalant, but it was evident that he was apprehensive. "Jack, what brings you to this hole tonight?" Jimmy asked, trying to sound casual. "I need information, Jimmy." "About Marcus Thorne and Victor Delgado." "I heard you've been hearing some things," Jack replied, his voice firm and direct. Jimmy swallowed hard, his nervousness evident. He knew he couldn't lie to Jack. "Look, Jack, I heard Delgado was pressing Marcus over a gambling debt. A large sum. They were on a collision course. But there's something more. A third man was in the middle of this mess," Jimmy said, his eyes avoiding Jack's piercing gaze. "Who is this third man?" Jack pressed, sensing he was close to an important revelation. Jimmy hesitated, looking around as if searching for someone who might be listening. "I don't know his name, but I heard he's a new player in town, someone with powerful connections." Marcus was nervous about this guy. "And there's one more thing. I heard this third man was looking for something." "Something Marcus had," Jimmy revealed, lowering his voice. Jack frowned, his detective instincts picking up on the significance of this information. If Marcus had something this man wanted, it could be the key to understanding what really happened. "And what about Sammy Baines?" "What do you know about him?" Jack asked, recalling the photograph he found in Marcus's office. "Sammy? He disappeared years ago, but I heard he's back in town recently. Hiding out somewhere on the outskirts, away from prying eyes," Jimmy responded, nervously glancing at the door. Jack knew he needed to find Sammy. If he was involved, he could have valuable information about what happened to Marcus. He left a few bills on the counter for Jimmy and walked out of the bar, his next destination clear in his mind. The search for Sammy Baines led him to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The place was in ruins, with broken windows and graffiti-covered walls. Jack approached cautiously, the sound of his footsteps echoing in the oppressive silence. Inside the warehouse, he found Sammy, a man who looked like he had aged a decade since he disappeared. Sammy was sitting in a dark corner, his skeletal figure wrapped in tattered clothes. Seeing Jack, he looked up with a mixture of surprise and resignation. "Jack Sullivan. I thought I'd never see you again," Sammy said, his voice weak and trembling. "Sammy, I need answers." "About Marcus Thorne and what happened to him," Jack replied, approaching. Sammy sighed, as if carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. "Marcus, Delgado and I, we were partners in a big scam. But things went wrong. I got arrested, and Marcus and Delgado went on with their lives. I always knew this day would come, that the past would come back to haunt us," Sammy said, his voice filled with regret. Jack knelt beside Sammy, looking directly into his eyes. "Sammy, who is the third man? And what does he want?" Jack asked urgently. Sammy hesitated, but finally gave in. "The third man is someone with power. He wants something Marcus stole in the past, something very valuable. I don't know what it is, but I know it's important enough to kill for," Sammy revealed, his voice a whisper. Jack felt a chill run down his spine. The truth was beginning to emerge, but there were still many missing pieces. He knew he had to keep digging, uncovering every secret until he found the final piece of the puzzle. As he left the warehouse, Jack felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. The city of Chesterfield was a maze of betrayals and lies, and he was determined to find the truth, no matter how dark it might be. The investigation was just beginning, and Jack Sullivan was ready to face whatever came his way. Chapter 4. Secrets Revealed. The early morning in Chesterfield was cold and dense, with a fog that seemed to entangle itself in the streets, obscuring the city's shadowy outlines. Jack Sullivan was in his office, surrounded by notes, photos, and clues scattered across the table. The investigation was progressing, but each new lead seemed to raise more questions than answers. He knew the next step was to return to Marcus Thorne's office and search for more clues. Arriving at Marcus' luxurious office building, Jack used his lock-picking skills to discreetly enter. Marcus' office was a blend of sophistication and decadence, with expensive furniture and extravagant decorations that contrasted with the dark nature of the business conducted there. Jack began rummaging through drawers and shelves, searching for anything that might illuminate Marcus' secrets. After a few minutes of searching, he found a safe hidden behind a painting on the wall. Using his skills and experience, Jack managed to open the safe. Inside, he found a series of incriminating documents revealing Marcus' illicit activities. There were drug trafficking contracts, bribe payment lists, and most intriguingly, an old photograph. The photograph showed Marcus, Delgado, and an unknown man, all younger and seemingly happy. What could have turned these men from friends into mortal enemies? Jack placed the documents and the photograph in his briefcase, feeling that he was getting closer to the truth. But he knew he needed more information. He decided to return to the Thorne mansion to confront Claire with his new discoveries. Upon arriving at the mansion, he was greeted by the same butler, who led him once again to the living room. Claire Thorne was more tense than before, her icy blue eyes seeming to pierce Jack's soul. "Mrs. Thorne, I found some documents in Marcus' office. They reveal a side of Marcus you might be very familiar with. And also this photo," Jack said, showing her the image. Claire looked at the photo, and for a moment, Jack saw an emotion pass across her face. Perhaps it was sadness, maybe regret. This photo, It's from a time Marcus wanted to forget. He, Victor, and Sammy were partners. They pulled off a big scam together, but things went wrong. Sammy got arrested, and Marcus and Victor went their separate ways. But Marcus always feared the past would come back to haunt him, Claire explained, her voice trembling. And this third man? Who is he? Jack asked, feeling he was about to uncover a major secret. Claire hesitated, her eyes avoiding Jack's. I don't know his name. I only know he appeared a few months ago, threatening Marcus. He said he wanted something Marcus had, something valuable. Marcus never told me what it was, but he was terrified. He knew he was in danger, Claire confessed, finally meeting Jack's gaze. Jack felt that the truth was within his reach, but there was still one missing piece. He decided to seek out Sammy Baines again, hoping he could provide more information about what Marcus might have that was so valuable. He returned to the abandoned warehouse where he had found Sammy. Upon entering, he saw the place was empty, except for a note left on the floor. The note read, "Meet me where it all began." Jack knew exactly where that was, the abandoned pier where Marcus, Delgado, and Sammy had carried out their big scam years ago. Arriving at the pier, the night was even darker, and the sound of waves crashing against the wooden pillars added a sinister soundtrack to the scene. Jack found Sammy hiding among the shadows, looking even more frail than before. "Sammy, I need to know. What did Marcus have that was so valuable?" Jack asked, his voice firm. Sammy sighed deeply, knowing he could no longer hide the truth. Marcus stole a shipment of diamonds during the scam. He hid the diamonds and promised they would split them once the dust settled. But with my imprisonment and the tensions between him and Delgado, it never happened. The third man, he's a powerful investor who financed the scam. He wants the diamonds back, Sammy revealed, his voice full of regret. Jack finally had the missing piece. The diamonds were the key to understanding why Marcus was killed. But who exactly was this third man? Jack knew the investigation was about to get even more dangerous, but he also knew he couldn't stop now. He was determined to uncover the identity of the mysterious man and solve Marcus Thorne's murder. As the night enveloped Chesterfield in its familiar darkness, Jack felt more prepared than ever to face the dangers that lay ahead. The city's shadows still hid many secrets, but Jack Sullivan was ready to uncover them, one by one. Chapter 5. The Man in the Photo. The rain fell relentlessly over Chesterfield, a veil of water that blurred the city's lights and deepened the shadows. Jack Sullivan drove through the drenched streets, his mind spinning with the new revelations. He had a clear lead: find Sammy Baines, and learn more about the stolen diamonds and the mysterious third man in the photo. The information that Sammy had recently returned to town was crucial. Jack used his contacts in the police to track down possible locations where Sammy might be hiding. After several hours of investigation, he discovered that Sammy was taking refuge in an old warehouse on the outskirts of the city, a place that once served as a depot for smuggled goods. Jack arrived at the warehouse, a grim and crumbling building surrounded by a rusty fence and broken windows. The atmosphere was heavy, the sound of rain hammering on the metal roof adding a sinister soundtrack to the scene. Jack entered cautiously, his hand resting on the gun in his holster. Inside the warehouse, the smell of mold and decay was overwhelming. He spotted Sammy in the back, hunched over and wrapped in a dirty coat, clearly worn down by years and haunted by dark memories. Seeing Jack, Sammy tried to stand, but his legs trembled with weakness. "Sammy, we need to talk," Jack said, approaching slowly. "Jack Sullivan, I thought Marcus' death would steer you away from this case. But it seems you're more stubborn than I remembered," Sammy replied, his voice raspy. I can't let this go, Sammy. Marcus' death is just the tip of the iceberg. Who is the third man? And what does he really want? Jack asked, getting straight to the point. Sammy sighed, running a trembling hand over his face. The third man is someone powerful, Jack. An investor who financed our big scam years ago. When things went wrong, he disappeared, but he never stopped watching us. When Marcus stole the diamonds, he signed his death warrant. This man wants the diamonds back, and he won't stop at anything, Sammy confessed. And you, Sammy? What do you know about these diamonds? Jack pressed. Sammy looked at Jack, his eyes full of desperation. I don't know where Marcus hid them. All I know is he always said the hiding place was where it started. That place is the abandoned pier where we pulled off the scam, Sammy explained. Jack knew he needed to return to the pier. There was something there, a final clue that could connect all the dots. But before he could leave, Sammy grabbed his arm. Jack, be careful. This man is dangerous. He has eyes and ears everywhere. If you get too close, he'll kill you, Sammy warned, his voice trembling with genuine fear. I know the risks, Sammy, but I can't stop now. I'm going to find those diamonds and discover who really pulled the trigger on Marcus, Jack said, determined. Back at the pier, the rain had lessened, but the atmosphere remained tense. Jack searched the area, looking for anything that could be a hiding place. His eyes caught sight of an old control booth, abandoned and covered in rust. He entered, feeling adrenaline pulse through his veins. Inside the booth, he found an old toolbox. Opening it, his heart raced. There was a small velvet bag, and upon opening it, Jack saw the glint of diamonds, each stone shining with an almost hypnotic intensity. He finally had the proof he needed. But before he could celebrate, he heard footsteps behind him. Congratulations, Sullivan. You found the diamonds. Now, hand them over, said a cold voice. Jack turned to find Victor Delgado, holding a gun with a look of triumph. Delgado, what are you doing here? Jack asked, keeping his cool. I'm not alone, Jack. I'm working for someone much more powerful. Someone who wants these diamonds back. And now that you've done the dirty work, I'll take the credit. Delgado smiled, his eyes gleaming with greed. Before Delgado could react, a shot rang out across the pier. Delgado fell to the ground, dead. Jack turned to see Claire Thorne, holding a gun steadily. Claire? What are you doing here? Jack asked, surprised. Saving your life, it seems, Claire replied, holstering the gun. I knew Delgado was after the diamonds. He was always a snake, but I couldn't let him kill you. Jack looked at Claire, trying to understand her motives. Why help me, Claire? Jack asked, skeptical. Because I want justice for Marcus. He made many mistakes, but he didn't deserve to die like that. And also, Claire hesitated, her eyes showing a rare vulnerability. I need this to end. I'm tired of living in the shadows. Jack nodded, finally understanding Claire's complexity. They were in this together, at least for now. Then let's finish this. Together, Jack said, holding the diamonds firmly. The path to the truth was almost complete, but there was still one last secret to uncover. The powerful man behind everything was still in the shadows, waiting for his moment to strike. And Jack knew the final battle was near, a battle that would decide the fate of everyone involved. Chapter 6. Dangerous Alliances. The rain had finally ceased, but the atmosphere in Chesterfield remained heavy with the promise of more violence. Jack Sullivan and Claire Thorne knew they were dealing with a powerful enemy, someone pulling the strings from the shadows. The diamonds were the key, but they still needed to uncover the identity of the man behind everything. Back in Jack's office, the two discussed their next steps. The air was thick with tension, but also with a shared determination to put an end to this scheme. So, Delgado was working for this mysterious man. Do you have any idea who he might be? Jack asked, lighting a cigarette and offering one to Claire, who declined with a shake of her head. Marcus mentioned a powerful man who financed the big scam. He always referred to him as the investor. But I never knew his name, Claire said, her eyes fixed on the diamonds on the table. Jack thought for a moment, recalling all the clues he had gathered. He decided that the best way to find out more was to follow the money trail. There was one person in town who had access to that kind of information. Lydia, the accountant Harlow, a financial expert with a knack for uncovering financial secrets. Lydia operated out of a discreet office in downtown Chesterfield, and Jack knew she would only help for a price. Upon arriving at her office, he was greeted by an assistant who led them to Lydia. She was a middle-aged woman, elegant with eyes that seemed to see through people. Jack Sullivan, what a surprise, and accompanied by the lovely Claire Thorne. To what do I owe the pleasure? Lydia asked, an enigmatic smile on her face. We need your help, Lydia. We're looking for information about a man known as the investor. He financed a big scam years ago and is now after the diamonds Marcus Thorne stole, Jack explained, placing the diamonds on the table as proof. Lydia looked at the diamonds, then at Jack and Claire, her smile fading. The investor. Yes, I've heard of him. He's a dangerous man. But I can find out more, for a price, of course, Lydia said, her eyes gleaming at the prospect of a substantial payment. Jack knew he had no other choice. He agreed to the price, and Lydia got to work. Using her network of contacts and financial investigation skills, she traced transactions and connections that led to a single identity. Jonathan Blackwood, an investment magnate with an impeccable reputation on the surface but known in the underworld as a master manipulator. Blackwood is the man you're looking for. He has a network of thugs and informants all over the city. If he wants something, he gets it, Lydia said, handing Jack a dossier with all the information she had gathered. Jack felt a chill run down his spine as he read about Jonathan Blackwood. This was the kind of man who destroyed lives without blinking, all in the name of profit and power. And now, he was after the diamonds that Jack and Claire had in their possession. Back at the office, Jack and Claire discussed what to do next. They knew they couldn't confront Blackwood head-on. They needed a plan, something that would put them a step ahead. We need allies, Jack. People who can help us expose Blackwood and ensure our safety, Claire said, her voice firm. Jack agreed. There were some old contacts who might be useful. He made a few calls, arranging a meeting with some of the most influential players in Chesterfield's Underworld, including Lou, the bartender from the Blue Moon, and Jimmy the Rat. The next night, they met in an abandoned warehouse, away from prying eyes. Lou and Jimmy arrived first, followed by a few other acquaintances of Jack. The meeting was tense, each person wary of the other, but they all knew that facing Blackwood alone was suicide. We need to unite against Blackwood. He controls this city from the shadows, but together, we can bring him down, Jack said, trying to persuade the group. Lou, ever the pragmatist, was the first to speak. Blackwood is a big fish, Jack. But if you've got a plan, I'm in. I've seen firsthand what he's capable of, and I'm tired of living in fear, Lou said, his voice firm. Jimmy nodded, his nervousness evident but determined to help. Count me in, Jack. Blackwood's caused me too much trouble already. It's time to settle the score, Jimmy said, trying to sound brave. With the support of those present, Jack began to outline a plan. They would use the diamonds as bait to lure Blackwood into a trap, exposing his criminal activities to the police and the press. They knew it was risky, but it was their only chance to take down such a powerful man. In the following days, the preparation was intense. Jack and Claire, with the help of their allies, gathered evidence, prepared false dossiers, and armed themselves for the final confrontation. They knew Blackwood wouldn't back down without a fight, but they were ready to face anything. Finally, the day of the confrontation arrived. The plan was simple but dangerous. Lure Blackwood to an isolated warehouse with the promise of retrieving the diamonds. Jack and Claire, along with their allies, were hidden, ready to record everything and ensure the truth was exposed. When Blackwood arrived, accompanied by his thugs, Jack felt the tension in the air. It was now or never. They had to play their cards right, or everything would be lost. "Mr. Blackwood, we have what you want. But we want to make a deal," Jack said, stepping out of the shadows. Blackwood looked at Jack with a cold smile. "Sullivan, you have guts. I'll give you that. But do you really think you can trick me?" Blackwood said, his thugs raising their guns. Before Jack could respond, a gunfight broke out. Claire, Lou, Jimmy, and the others sprang into action, fighting to protect their lives and expose the truth. The warehouse turned into a battlefield, with gunshots echoing and cries of desperation. In the chaos, Jack saw Blackwood trying to escape. He knew he couldn't let that happen. Chasing after him, Jack caught up to him at the back of the warehouse, where a final showdown awaited them. "It's over, Blackwood. You're going to pay for everything you've done," Jack said, his gun pointed at the magnate. Blackwood smiled, a smile full of contempt. "You can arrest me, Sullivan, but you'll never stop me. There will always be someone like me," Blackwood said defiantly. Jack, with a mix of anger and determination, replied, "Maybe, but today, you're going down." As the police arrived, drawn by the noise and the evidence that Jack and his allies had gathered, Blackwood was finally arrested. The battle was won, but Jack knew the war against corruption would never end. However, in that moment, he felt a victory, a step in the right direction. Chesterfield was still a city of shadows and secrets, but thanks to Jack, Claire, and their allies, a light shone brighter. And as long as there was darkness, Jack Sullivan would be there, ready to face whatever came from the underworld. Chapter 7. The showdown news of Jonathan Blackwood's arrest spread quickly through Chesterfield. A city accustomed to corruption and fear seemed to breathe a little easier, but Jack Sullivan knew the battle was far from over. The city's shadows still hid many secrets, and Blackwood's people would not give up easily. Jack and Claire Thorne were back in Jack's office, reviewing evidence and preparing for the next step. The diamonds were secured in a safe place, but they knew they were still a target. Blackwood's allies would not surrender without a fight. "We need to prepare for the worst, Claire. Blackwood might be in prison, but his goons are still out there. They'll try to recover the diamonds and take revenge," Jack said, his voice firm but weary. "I agree. We need a plan to protect the diamonds and ensure Blackwood and his allies are fully exposed," Claire responded, her gaze determined. As they discussed their next actions, a phone call interrupted. It was Lou, the bartender from the Blue Moon, with urgent information. "Jack, I just heard some of Blackwood's men are gathering at a warehouse at the port. Looks like they're planning something big." "You need to check it out," Lou said, his voice full of concern. Jack thanked him for the tip and hung up. He knew he couldn't ignore this lead. If Blackwood's men were assembling, they were likely planning retaliation. "Claire, we're heading to the port. We need to see what's happening and stop their plans before they cause more damage," Jack said, standing up and grabbing his gun. By the time they arrived at the port, night had already fallen, enveloping the area in darkness and silence. Jack and Claire approached the indicated warehouse, moving stealthily through the shadows. They could hear voices inside, heated discussions and preparations being made. "We need to get in and catch these guys by surprise." If we can expose their plans, we can finally dismantle Blackwood's network, Jack whispered, preparing to enter. Carefully, they opened the warehouse door and slipped inside. The scene they found was chaotic. Several armed men, boxes of weapons and ammunition scattered around, and in the center, a map of the city with marked points, indicating potential targets. Jack and Claire positioned themselves strategically, ready to act. But before they could do anything, a familiar voice interrupted. Look who decided to show up. Jack Sullivan and the lovely Claire Thorne. Thought you could take us down so easily, said Victor Delgado, emerging from the shadows with a cruel smile. Delgado, I thought you were dead, Jack responded, surprised but maintaining his composure. Seems I underestimated your resilience, Claire said, her tone equally defiant. Delgado laughed, a cold and humorless sound. Blackwood may be in prison, but that means nothing. He still has powerful friends, and one of them. You two made a big mistake getting involved with us, Delgado said, pointing a gun at them. Before Delgado could shoot, Jack acted. He dived to the side, pulling Claire with him, and opened fire on Delgado and his men. The battle inside the warehouse was intense, with shots echoing and sparks flying as bullets ricocheted off metal walls. Jack and Claire fought with determination, using every available cover and moving with precision. Delgado and his henchmen were numerous, but Jack had the advantage of surprise and years of experience on Chesterfield's streets. In the chaos, Claire managed to get close to Delgado. With a swift move, she disarmed him and knocked him to the ground, holding a gun to his head. It's over, Delgado. Where are the others? Claire demanded, her voice firm. It doesn't matter what you do. There will always be someone to continue Blackwood's work, Delgado spat, blood trickling from his mouth. Then we'll make sure that work ends today, Jack said, approaching and knocking Delgado out with a precise blow. With Delgado out of action, the remaining henchmen were quickly subdued. Jack and Claire searched the warehouse, finding more evidence of Blackwood's plans and his allies. It was time to hand everything over to the police and ensure the criminal network was finally dismantled. Back at the office, exhausted but victorious, Jack and Claire reflected on recent events. They knew the fight against corruption would never truly end, but at least, for now, they had made a difference. We did it, Jack. At least we took down part of this network, Claire said, a tired but satisfied smile on her face. Yes, but there's still much to do. Chesterfield still needs people willing to fight for justice. And as long as there are shadows, you'll be here to face them, Jack replied, determined. The city of Chesterfield continued to live its dark and dangerous nights, but thanks to Jack Sullivan and Claire Thorne, the light of justice shone a little brighter. They knew the road ahead would be tough, but they were ready to face it together, one step at a time. Chapter 8. The Truth Emerges. The arrest of Victor Delgado and the discovery of Blackwood's plans dealt a significant blow to Chesterfield's criminal network. However, Jack Sullivan knew the real battle was yet to come. Blackwood still had powerful allies and secrets that could shake the city's foundations. Jack and Claire needed more information to ensure Blackwood's empire was destroyed once and for all. Back at the office, Jack and Claire began reviewing the evidence collected at the warehouse. Among the documents, they found details about trafficking operations, corruption, and bribes linking several important figures in Chesterfield to Blackwood's empire. It was time to confront these figures and expose the truth. Their first stop was the police station, where they handed over the documents to Captain Matthews, an honest cop Jack had known for years. Matthews was a burly man with a stern but fair expression. He was shocked to see the extent of the corruption revealed by the documents. Jack, this is explosive. But you know exposing these people won't be easy. They have a lot of power and resources to protect themselves, Matthews said, leafing through the papers. We know that, Captain. But that's why we need to make sure this information reaches the public. Sunlight is the best disinfectant for these pests, Jack replied, determined. Matthews agreed and promised to start investigating the figures mentioned in the documents. But Jack knew they needed a more comprehensive plan to ensure the truth was revealed irrevocably. They decided to go after one of the central figures in Blackwood's network, a corrupt judge named Albert Harrison. Harrison was known for being ruthless in his judicial decisions, but behind his facade of justice, he manipulated verdicts in favor of Blackwood in exchange for generous bribes. Jack and Claire followed Harrison to his luxurious house in the suburbs. They knew confronting him directly could be risky, so they decided to search his residence for more evidence. They waited until nightfall when the house seemed deserted and broke in. Inside the house, they found a hidden office in the basement, filled with incriminating documents. There were records of bribes, suspicious financial transactions, and even correspondence between Harrison and Blackwood. They were about to leave when they heard footsteps. Bonk, bonk. Harrison, realizing the break-in, entered the office with a gun in hand. His face, once calm and confident, was now twisted with fear and anger. "What the hell are you doing here?" Harrison shouted, pointing the gun at Jack. "We're here to end your charade, Harrison. We know everything. The bribes, the judicial manipulations, your connection to Blackwood. We have enough evidence to bury you," Jack said, keeping calm. Harrison laughed, a bitter and desperate sound. "You think you can defeat me? Blackwood has eyes and ears all over the city. If you take me down, others will take my place," Harrison replied, his voice trembling. Before Harrison could shoot, Claire acted swiftly, disarming him with a precise move. Harrison fell to the ground, clutching his injured arm, while Jack took the gun and secured it. "You will pay for your crimes, Harrison. But first, you're going to tell us everything you know about Blackwood and his allies," Claire said, her voice cold as ice. Seeing no way out, Harrison finally gave in. He confessed everything: how he was recruited by Blackwood, the cases he manipulated, the payments he received. Jack and Claire recorded the confession, ensuring it would be enough to incriminate him and expose others involved. With the new evidence and Harrison's confession, Jack and Claire returned to the police station, where Captain Matthews quickly began acting to arrest Blackwood's accomplices. But there was one last piece of the puzzle to be resolved: the fate of the stolen diamonds. Jack knew the diamonds were the key to luring Blackwood and his remaining allies into a final trap. He decided to use the diamonds as bait, arranging a meeting at the abandoned pier where it all began. On the night of the meeting, Jack, Claire, and Matthews were ready, hidden in the shadows with a team of police officers. They knew it was risky, but they had no choice. It was the last chance to take down Blackwood's empire once and for all. When Blackwood arrived, accompanied by his last henchman, Jack stepped out of the shadows, holding the bag of diamonds. "Blackwood, it's over. We have enough evidence to ensure you spend the rest of your life in prison. But I'm giving you a chance to surrender," Jack said firmly. Blackwood laughed, a cold and disdainful laugh. "You really think you can arrest me, Sullivan? I have resources you can't even imagine." "These diamonds are just a fraction of what I control," Blackwood replied, his eyes gleaming with arrogance. Before Blackwood could order his men to attack, Matthews and the police officers emerged, guns drawn. There was a brief confrontation, but Blackwood's henchmen, seeing they were outnumbered, quickly surrendered. Blackwood, with no alternatives, finally raised his hands in surrender. "You won this time, Sullivan. But remember, power never really disappears. There will always be someone to take my place," Blackwood said, as the police handcuffed him. "Maybe, but today, you're going down. And Chesterfield will be a slightly better place because of it," Jack replied, determined. With Blackwood arrested and his accomplices exposed, the criminal network began to crumble. Jack and Claire knew there was still much to do, but they had taken a significant step in the fight against corruption. Back at the office, exhausted but satisfied, Jack and Claire reflected on the journey. "We did a good job, Claire." "But the fight continues," Jack said, lighting a cigarette. "Yes, Jack. But at least today, we made a difference." "And that's what matters," Claire replied, smiling. As the city of Chesterfield continued to live its dark nights, a new light of hope shone. Jack Sullivan and Claire Thorne were ready to face whatever came, determined to protect truth and justice in a world full of shadows. Chapter 9. Justice in the Underworld. Chesterfield awoke under a heavy gray sky, a perfect metaphor for the battle unfolding in the city's shadows. The arrest of Jonathan Blackwood and the fall of his criminal network had shaken the Underworld's foundations, but Jack Sullivan knew that true justice was yet to come. The corrupt system that fueled men like Blackwood was wounded, but not dead. Jack and Claire Thorne were back at the office, where fatigue was beginning to weigh on them, but the determination in their eyes showed they were far from giving up. Captain Matthews had made significant progress with the arrests, but the battle for Chesterfield's soul was far from over. "We need to make sure all this evidence gets to the public, Jack. We can't let anything be covered up," Claire said, her voice filled with urgency. "I agree. But we need to be careful. Blackwood still has powerful allies. We have to expose everything in a way they can't ignore," Jack replied, leafing through the documents on the table. They decided the best way to ensure the truth was revealed was through a press conference. Jack used his contacts to organize a meeting with the city's leading journalists. They would hold the conference at City Hall, a symbol of authority and transparency, where public exposure couldn't be easily suppressed. On the morning of the conference, the City Hall lobby was packed with reporters and cameras, all eager to hear the explosive revelations. Jack and Claire stood beside Captain Matthews, who had ensured the location's security. The nervousness was palpable, but the determination was even stronger. Jack stepped up to the podium, his expression grave but resolute. He began to speak, recounting the story of their investigations, the discoveries, and the arrests that had shaken Chesterfield's underworld. He presented evidence, names, transactions, and, most importantly, Albert Harrison's confession. "This city has been held hostage by a corrupt system for too long, but today, we're here to say that ends now. Jonathan Blackwood and his accomplices are behind bars, and their actions are exposed for all to see. Chesterfield deserves better, and we are committed to ensuring that justice prevails," Jack declared, his voice echoing through the hall. The reaction was immediate. Reporters began asking questions, snapping photos, and broadcasting the news live. The truth was finally being revealed to the entire city, and the impact was devastating for those trying to hide their crimes. As the press conference was happening across town in a dark room, a man watched the news on television. His eyes were cold and calculating. This was Lucas Moretti, one of Blackwood's last and most powerful allies, a man with the ability to either rebuild the criminal empire or destroy it for good. Moretti knew Jack and Claire were a real threat and decided he needed to act quickly to protect his interests. He made a call, summoning his henchmen for an urgent meeting. Jack and Claire, feeling the weight of their actions and the imminence of retaliation, decided to prepare for the worst. They returned to the office, reinforcing security and arming themselves for what could be the final showdown. That night, as the city slept uneasily, Moretti and his men surrounded Jack's office. The tension was palpable, and the street's silence was broken only by the distant sound of sirens and the rustling of the wind. "Jack, they're here," Claire whispered, watching through the window. "I know. This is the decisive moment." "We need to stick together and be quick," Jack replied, checking his gun. When Moretti's men stormed in, the battle was fierce. Gunfire echoed through the night, shattering glass and tearing through the silence. Jack and Claire fought with everything they had, moving with precision and determination. "Moretti, it's over for you," Jack shouted, confronting the crime boss. "Never underestimate the power of money and corruption, Sullivan. You can take me down, but there will always be someone to take my place," Moretti retorted before being disarmed by Claire. With Moretti subdued and his men surrendering, Jack and Claire finally breathed a sigh of relief. The battle had been won, but the war for justice in Chesterfield continued. Moretti was arrested, and the last pieces of the puzzle were put in place. The next morning, Chesterfield awoke to a new reality. Newspaper headlines were filled with stories about the fall of Blackwood's criminal empire and the bravery of Jack Sullivan and Claire Thorne. For the first time in a long while, the city felt a renewed sense of hope. Jack and Claire, exhausted but satisfied, returned to the office, where a new light shone through the broken windows. "We made a difference, Jack. But we know the fight never really ends," Claire said, a tired but determined smile on her face. "Yes, Claire, but today we can rest a bit knowing Chesterfield is a bit safer. And tomorrow, we'll be ready to face any new shadow that arises," Jack replied, looking out at the city he loved. As the sun rose over Chesterfield, Jack Sullivan and Claire Thorne knew they had fought a just battle, a battle for the soul of a city that deserved to be saved. And as long as there were shadows, they would be there, ready to face whatever came, together. Thus, a new era was born for Chesterfield, an era of hope, justice, and courage. And Jack Sullivan, the tireless detective, would continue his vigil. Always watchful, always ready to fight for what was right.